Are you in a storm right now? Or are you in a place that you never intended to be? So, if you are, what are you doing? What are you doing in the midst of the storm? And what are you doing at the place you weren't intended to be or that you didn't plan to be? I'm going to share with you this morning a story about Paul and that how he was able to just be this anchor of faith and hope and an ambassador to the Lord while on a ship going to a direction that he not had that ended up where he not had intended to go. God had promised Paul that he was going to be able to be taken in front of Caesar. So he gets on this ship with these people, and Paul had kind of warned them and said, I don't think it's a good time right now to leave because of the weather. The storm is coming. And of course, they looked up and they didn't see anything in the sky or what was going on, and they chose not to believe Paul. So not too long after they're on the ship and they're traveling, it says right here, and this is in Acts 27, it says in verse 13, and then when the south wind blew softly, so a storm came, and you move on down, and it says right here and that a great tempest had come upon them, and then it says that they had lightened the ship, and on the third day they were cast out with their own hands, and the tackling of the ship, and neither the sun nor the stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us. All hope that we should be saved was taken away. Do you ever feel like that sometimes in your life, that you are on a ship in a bad storm and a tempest is coming? You don't feel like you've seen daylight. You've not had a break. You feel hard pressed and concerned with everything, and you just feel like giving up. So here's Paul, and here's the other ones that's in here, and it says, but long after Paul stood up, and here's what he says: in the middle of the storm, this is what we need to learn to say. We need to continue to have our faith and trust in God, that He, number one, has a plan for us. If we can be obedient and really trust Him, He'll get us there. Sometimes there are detours involved. God has a plan for us. Maybe God needs to make a pit stop with us. Maybe He needs us to do some specific work for Him. But we're in the storm. Sometimes we're so consumed, all we want to think about is ourselves and what's going on, and we want to wring our hands in despair. But listen what Paul says in Acts 27, let's go to verse 22, and it says, now I exhort you to be of good cheer. Be of good cheer. Are you kidding me? We're in the middle of the ocean. We have a storm on us. We are really freaking out here, and you're telling us to be of good cheer? And he says, be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. For there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am. I'm a child of God too, aren't you? And whom I serve, saying, fear not, Paul. Remember, fear and anxiety does not come from God. That comes from Satan. Thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God. It was so many circumstances with Paul that he knew that he could trust and believe God. And whatever storm you're in right now, you have that same relationship and that same faith. You can trust in God. Just believe that He has a plan. It may look a little scary. The lights may be out sometimes, but just trust God. Just trust what He's going to do. And it says, I believe God, that it shall be even as if it were told to me. Howbeit, we must be cast upon a certain island. So as time passed on, it says, but the 14th, this is in verse 27 of 27, but when the 14th night was come, as we were driven up and down in Adria, about midnight, the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some kind of country. So they kept sounding, and they kept thinking they were getting closer and closer. And it says, then, fearing lest we should have fallen upon the rocks, they cast out 4 anchors of the stern. Do you ever sometimes find yourself in a position and you think, okay, I just can't go on anymore. I've got to stop right here. I'm fearful. I'm afraid. And so what they did is they threw out the anchors to stop the ship. And it says that lest we should have fallen upon the rocks, and they cast out 4 anchors out of the stern and wished for the day. And so it says, and as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea under color as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship, Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, you cannot be saved. Stay in the ship through the storm. Let God do what He needs to do. Don't get ready to jump ship and give up. Don't be trying to take and put things into your own hands. Trust God. So as we move on down, Paul, once again, through the scripture, you need to read Acts 27 and 28 to get the full story. It's really remarkable. And so as they went on down, it says that that in verse 20 and verse 39 of 28, and then when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust in the ship. And when they had taken up the anchors, they committed themselves into the sea. See, that's what we have to do sometimes. We have to commit ourselves into God. Just free fall. Just, okay, we're going to have to let, they were going to let the ocean or to be in charge of where they were going. We need to let God be in control of where he's going to take us, no matter how uncertain we are, and no matter what land we're about to shipwreck on. We need to trust God. And it says that, and they loosed the rudder bands, and they hoisted up the mainsail to the wind, and made toward shore. So as they went on down, so they landed in a place called Malta that they had not intended to be. And one of the things it says here, that when they were there, it says the barbarous, in 28 2, it says, and the barbarous people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received us every one, because of the present time, and because of the cold. And when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks. Now I want you to pay attention to that. Here is Paul in a place that he did not intend to be. This was not what was part of the regular journey that he thought, just like most of us. He finds himself as a prisoner, shipwrecked on an island. And what does he do? He immediately becomes a servant. In the midst of the storm, Paul was the one who brought good cheer. In the midst of the storm, he was the one who told people to trust in God, to stay in the ship. And then now, in the midst of the storm, shipwrecked on an island in Malta, as a prisoner, what does Paul do? He goes out and starts gathering kindling. Listen, everybody's eyes are on you when you are in the storm. You need to remember that. Be his ambassador while you're in the storm. Continue to be a servant. And try to take the purpose off the way you feel, but just start believing in your heart that you can trust God to deliver you where you need to be at your appointed time. And it says that when Paul had gathered a bundle, this is in verse 3 of 28, when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on the fire, there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. And it says that, and when the barbarians saw the venomous beast hang on his hand, they said among themselves, no doubt this man is a murderer, for whom though he hath escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffereth not to live. Isn't that how it is with people? When people see bad things happen to us or things not working out, they automatically assume, well, they must not be living right, or they must not be doing things right, or they're just not doing what they're supposed to do, or else they wouldn't have been bitten by the venomous snake. But you know what Paul did? He immediately just shakes that off and keeps on going like nothing's wrong. And then when he kept moving on, and when he slung it off like it was no big, when things hit you sometimes, just kind of shake them off. Keep that stern faith that Paul had on this voyage, and don't let those things take attack on you in your life. Remember that you know that the God you serve today is still sitting on that throne, and he is still in control. So what happened is, after that, the people in the city, they changed on the island, they had changed their mind, and they started to believe that Paul was some kind of god. But what he also found out is that when they were staying with this gentleman, that it was his father, the father of this young man lay sick of fever and of a bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. Are you believing this? This guy, Paul, going through the storm, which he told people of the ship we shouldn't go, then he has to give them good cheer because they're panicking and they want to jump the ship and take life into their own hands. They finally cut the anchors. They shipwrecked. He goes to an island. He's there not saying, oh me, oh my, and what about me, but he gets up and he's a servant. He gets bits by viper. And because he experienced this one experience, it was an opportunity for others to see what God had intended for Paul. He was able then to turn that around, go in and actually pray for someone who was healed. See, this is the kind of ambassador we need to be for God when we're going through the storm. Don't ball up and cry and say, woe is me. Get up on your feet, put your boots on, put your war paint on, and then you face this, and you be that light and example to people's lives. When people are watching you the most, let your life totally reflect God. You need to be an absolute lighthouse to direct people exactly to the great I am. So as that happened, I want you to think about this as this went on. It says that so many others that Paul laid hands on him and healed him. So when this was done, others also which had diseases in the land came and were healed, who was also honored with us many honors. And when we departed, they laded us with such things that was necessary. See, Malta wasn't expecting Paul, and Paul wasn't expecting Malta. But because that God provided a detour to Malta, so many lives on that island was changed. So think about this. Whatever storm you're going through right now, embrace it and use it to be a witness and a testimony to others so others can see how great and powerful God is in your lives. Don't jump ship. Here, God has a plan. Remember this. Be of good cheer. Stay in the boat. Let loose of what you may have faith in other than God. Don't cling onto the things of this world, the tangible things that can be broken and not proven. God has proven himself over and over again. He is faithful. He will get you where he wants you to be. But on that journey, be his ambassador. Do his work, his will, his way. And then just remember to be the anchor of hope to other people when you're going through the storm or when you're in the midst of something with somebody else. Try to shower them with encouragement. Be that encourager. Today, no matter what storm you're going through, I implore you to be like Paul. Just be of good cheer. Have faith. And no matter what you're going through, continue to be God's servant and let your light shine for others. You have a very blessed, prosperous day.